Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a Bourgogne Aligoté. I've been looking to do a tasting on a classic Bourgogne Aligoté for a little while and was delighted to find this one. The wine is produced by Domaine, Céline and Frédéric Gueguen. It's a 2022 vintage, and as I say, it's Bourgogne Aligoté. So what I was looking for in an Aligoté was a wine from the Yonne Valley, ideally, so a northerly region to the west of Chablis. I was looking for a wine that would have the sort of crisp, elegant style that defined this sort of Bourgogne Aligoté. Now, Domaine Céline and Frédéric Gueguen is a relatively newly formed domain, and yet it's one with very deep connections to the history of this region. Celine and Frederic met when they were working at her father's company, that is Jean-Marc Brocard, a large and widely distributed Chablis producer with a very good reputation. Frederic himself had grown up in the region and had worked, for instance, for his cousin Francis Boudin and for his uncle Jean Durup before he'd come to Jean-Marc Brocard. In 2013, the pair moved away from Jean-Marc Brocard to start their own estate, leaving one of Celine's brothers to carry on running that operation. In 2014, Celine's mother, Louise, gave the couple her vineyards, which were vineyards that had been owned and planted by her parents, Celine's grandparents. So currently the domain consists of 36 hectares of vines. Predominantly these are Chardonnay vineyards in the Chablis region, so they produce Chablis, they produce a number of Premier and Grand Cru Chablis. But they also have a concentration, a bit of a specialism in wines from some of the other appellations in this more northerly part of Burgundy. So for instance, they produce this Bourgogne Aligoté from vineyards in Saint-Bris, where they also make AOC Sauvignon de Saint-Bris. They also have Pinot Noir vines growing in Irancy, and have some vineyards planted with really quite obscure grape varieties such as Sacy and César. This wine, for instance, comes from a 1.5 hectare plot of vines that were planted in 1965, as I say, by Celine's grandparents. And they were very carefully planted as a Selection Massale. So her grandparents had selected the best cuttings of Aligoté vines from their existing vineyards and had propagated those to plant this vineyard. Today the vineyards are carefully tended. Evidently Frederic primarily looks after the vineyards. The vines are cultivated as sustainably as possible. And since 2018 they've had the HEV3 sustainability certification for the vineyards. So for instance, they're only using natural treatments here. There's cultivation between the vines. And one of the things they're wanting to emphasize is the diversity of microbes in their vineyards. So they're very carefully monitor the development of these grapes as they ripen. Everything is hand-picked. It's very gently and slowly pressed, and the juice is chilled and is allowed to cold settle for about 20 hours. Once the juice is racked and clean, fermentation takes place in temperature-controlled stainless steel tanks. The fermentation is done entirely with the indigenous yeasts, hence the concentration on diversity of microbes in the vineyard, because they want to make sure that it's the yeasts from their vineyards that are conducting these fermentations. And they say during fermentation their only intervention is to control temperature, which they'll reduce to allow the wine to retain its lovely fresh aromas. Malolactic conversion is allowed to take place. That normally happens in November. Following April, in the middle of the month, they will fine the wine and lightly filter it into bottle. So the wine both fermented and aged in those stainless steel tanks. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? First thing to say is we've got a wine here with a pale to medium yellow colour. Swirling it, it seems a little reluctant to throw any tears. They might just be starting to form, hardly. According to its label, the wine only has 12% alcohol, so it's not likely to have particularly high viscosity. So let's have a look at the aromas, shall we? Very typically for Aligoté, these are relatively neutral aromas. The wine aged with its fine lees, and there are sort of slight dairy hints, sort of creaminess, yogurt, that sort of note. There are also some mineral notes. Maybe those are slightly fermentation derived, you know, touches of wet stone, that sort of. But underlying this, there is a delicate sort of, probably more pear fruit but it really is very delicate, very restrained, and very harmoniously combines with those dairy notes that I was talking about. So let's have a taste. On the palate, the wine's dry, and it's a very crisp wine. There's a sharpness to the beginning of the palate. It's quite light-bodied, but there is a lovely rounded note to it as well. And again, I think that's that sort of delicate, gentle lees aging that's gone on there. The fruit has a slightly green edge. On the palate, it's perhaps more green apple than pear. And yet at the same time, it's an apple where the sharpness has been overlaid by a smooth roundness. Traditionally, Aligotés are really quite simple wines, and this is relatively straightforward, but it's been very well made. I mean, its texture is beautiful, the flavours last really beautifully, but they're delicate, they're elegant. Everything about the wine is harmonious, and this long finish is given its length by that crisp acidity that's coming through there, sort of lemony notes. There's certainly a very mineral note, maybe almost a saline hint as well. It's a simple, straightforward wine, but the lovely restrained concentration of the fruit shows how this combination of these old vines on classic Jurassic soils, this sort of Portlandian limestone, very rich in fossils, have combined to produce a wine that really reflects the place it's from. It's from a cool climate, it's delicate, it's elegant. The malolactic conversion having come through, it's not tart, although there's a lovely crispness to it. We have no Wine Searcher aggregated score for this particular wine, unfortunately. Thus far, perhaps it's a wine that's been overlooked by the critics. I would think it's worth a score of somewhere around 90 out of 100, which, considering this is not a massively expensive wine, could make it a very good option as an aperitif or something like that. We might pair it with lighter seafood and white fish. And given its good acidity and the lovely intensity of fruit, I think you could keep this in the cellar for 2 or 3 years and you'd see it fill out a little more, but I think it would still retain that beautiful freshness. It's a very nice example of an Aligoté and one I'm going to enjoy finishing off. So thank you so much for joining us. I do hope you found the tasting of interest. If you have, do please press the like button. If you have any comments you would like to leave, pop those in the comments box below. We would love to know what you think about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. If you have friends you think might like to see the video, please feel free to pass it on. We'd be really obliged for that. I'll leave a link in the comments box below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, so you can see where it's available, what its pricing is in your market, for instance. And then there are tabs on that page which will give you lots of background information into sort of the producer, the region, the grape variety. You can see price history there. You can see critics' notes when they exist. You can see other users' comments. So hopefully there's an amount of information there that you can find useful if you're thinking of buying the wine. So thank you again for joining us, and I do hope you'll find some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Until then, goodbye.